The universe, vast and uncaring as ever, had chosen Earth for its latest cosmic cockfight. It was a typical Thursday when the United Earth Coalition got the unwelcome notification that their little blue marble had been selected as a galactic battleground. Imagine the surprise. One minute you're sipping coffee, the next you're the unwilling host of a multi-species deathmatch. You can't make this stuff up. In a hastily assembled conference room that smelled like desperation and cheap aftershave, Arlen Venn, a diplomat in name but a professional headache in reality, sat slouched in his chair, staring at the holographic display. He had the look of a man who'd just been told his cat was running for mayor and had a good chance of winning. "So let me get this straight," he said, rubbing his temples as if that would somehow massage the stupidity out of the situation. "Our planet has been chosen as a venue for a celestial smackdown." Juno Tresk, the Coalition's go-to strategist and a woman who wore cynicism like a second skin, was half listening. She was more focused on the donut in her hand, which looked like it had survived a war of its own. "Yep. Galactic trial by combat. It's like jury duty but with more plasma rifles and less free coffee. Wonderful. I'm sure the neighbors will love that," Arlen replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Alien hordes tearing through their petunias. Think of it as extreme flower arranging," Juno said with a smirk, taking a bite of her donut. "No charge for the landscaping." A voice crackled over the intercom, cutting through their banter like a dull knife through stale bread. "The Alioth Tribunal will see you now." The Alioth Tribunal, Space's answer to a judicial system, minus any semblance of fairness. Known for their inscrutable rulings and even less understandable fashion choices, they were the be-all, end-all in intergalactic disputes. More like a cosmic kangaroo court, but with less jumping and more pontificating. "Great," said Arlen, pushing himself to his feet with all the enthusiasm of a man heading to his own execution. "Let's go plead our case to the folks who think justice is a spectator sport." Juno wiped her hands on her pants, leaving a faint smear of glaze, and followed Arlen out of the room. "Look on the bright side," she said as they walked down the corridor, passing a series of motivational posters that seemed more depressing than inspiring. "At least we get to wear these snazzy outfits." Arlen glanced down at his regulation blue jumpsuit, designed more for function than form. "I feel like a janitor in space," he muttered, adjusting the collar. "Maybe if we win, they'll let us keep them as a consolation prize." They entered the tribunal's chamber, a cavernous room filled with representatives from races most humans couldn't even pronounce, let alone comprehend. At the far end sat the Alioth Tribunal, a trio of beings resembling a cross between a praying mantis and a disco ball. They shimmered under the harsh lighting, their multifaceted eyes reflecting judgment and disdain in equal measure. "Earth representatives," the center mantis ball said, its voice a blend of static and superiority. "You stand accused of negligence in the maintenance of your planetary defenses." "Negligence?" Arlen echoed, incredulous. "We didn't even know we were in the running." "This is like finding out you're in a race after it's already started, and everyone else has rocket boots." "Ignorance is not an excuse," buzzed the left mantis ball. It sounded like it had been sucking on helium. "Your world is underprepared and overpopulated, making it an ideal testing ground for our conflict resolution protocols." Translation: "We're a soft target," Juno whispered, just loud enough for Arlen to hear. "They want to see how good their toys work." "We reject your claims and demand a fair trial," Arlen said, trying to inject some authority into his words. "We have rights too." The right mantis ball emitted a sound that might have been laughter or choking. It was hard to tell. "You misunderstand. This trial is for entertainment, not justice." "Lovely," Juno muttered. "We're the halftime show." Arlen clenched and unclenched his fists, the only sign of the frustration simmering beneath his facade of calm. "What can we do to change your minds?" he asked, knowing full well the futility of the question. "Impress us," the center mantis ball replied. "The event will proceed as planned. Your participation, however, is optional. Juno raised an eyebrow, giving Arlen a sidelong glance. Optional, huh? Sounds like the kind of optional where your house gets bulldozed if you don't sign the waiver. Exactly. We fight or we get flattened. The tribunal waved them off with a dismissive gesture, their interest waning as quickly as it had arrived. Arlen and Juno turned on their heels, making their way back to the relative safety of the corridor. "You know," Juno said once they were out of earshot, "I've had more productive conversations with a brick wall." "At least the wall doesn't talk back," Arlen replied. "This is a nightmare. Nightmare or not, we've got a job to do. Rally the troops, prep the defenses, and hope we're not the ones getting our asses handed to us." Arlen stopped, looking at Juno with a mix of admiration and exasperation. "You make it sound so easy." "That's 'cause I skipped the part where we all die horribly," she said with a smirk. No sense dwelling on the inevitable. They continued down the hallway, their footsteps echoing like a drumbeat of impending doom. The weight of Earth's fate hung over them, a leaden cloak they both wore with reluctant acceptance. Back in the command center, a ragtag assembly of military officers, scientists, and one very confused janitor awaited their return. "What's the verdict?" asked General Thorne, a grizzled veteran who looked like he'd seen one too many space wars and had the scars to prove it. "We're the opening act," Arlen said flatly, "and the main event." "Guess we better make it a damn good show," the janitor muttered, looking down at his mop like it might be the key to their salvation. "Get everyone ready," Juno ordered, cutting through the grim mood with the sharpness of her tone. "We don't have much time before the universe decides to rearrange our geography." "Don't forget the popcorn," Arlen added with a grim chuckle. "Wouldn't want the audience to get bored." As the room erupted into a flurry of activity, Juno pulled Arlen aside. "You think we've got a chance?" she asked, her voice low enough to be lost amidst the chaos. Arlen met her gaze, his expression inscrutable. "I think," he paused, searching for words that wouldn't sound like a death sentence. "I think if we don't, we're screwed." "Optimistic as always," Juno said, shaking her head. "But hey, at least it's never boring around you." "Stick with me, Tresk," Arlen replied with a wry smile. "I'll show you all the ways we can die before breakfast." They stood together, watching as their colleagues prepared for a fight that was as much a spectacle as it was a struggle for survival. In the grand scheme of things, Earth was just another stage, another pawn in a game too big for any one person to control. But Arlen and Juno, despite the odds and the overwhelming sense of futility, weren't about to roll over. Not while there was breath in their bodies and fire in their hearts. As the countdown to chaos began, they braced themselves for what was sure to be an unforgettable show. Whether they ended up as heroes or as dust, one thing was certain: they wouldn't go quietly. Because if the universe expected a neat and tidy fight, they'd never met anyone from Earth. After a brief pause to let the weight of their unenviable predicament settle in, Arlen and Juno found themselves back in the tribunal's chamber. The Alioth Tribunal had generously decided to grant the Earth delegation another audience. Generous, that is, in the way a cat grants a mouse a head start before pouncing. "Let's do this," Arlen sighed, more to himself than anyone else, as they stood at the threshold of the chamber. Round 2 of the intergalactic roast. The chamber was just as imposing as before, with the decor still firmly committed to its menacing bureaucracy meets alien art exhibit aesthetic. The tribunal trio sat there, shimmering with the kind of self-importance only beings with way too much power and not enough to do could manage. "Earth representatives," the center mantis ball droned, its voice like a radio caught between stations. "We will now present the evidence that solidifies your planet's selection as a battleground." "Evidence," Arlen muttered under his breath. Like we needed any more reasons to question the universe's sanity. The holographic display flared to life, projecting images of Earth that only seemed to highlight its vulnerabilities. "Strategic location," said the overlay, as if Earth were a prime piece of real estate rather than a half-drowned rock with a bad attitude. Your planet is located at a nexus of interdimensional ley lines, explained the left mantis ball, its tone as dry as the Martian desert. Ideal for quick deployment of transspatial armadas. Oh great, Juno whispered to Arlen. We're a cosmic truck stop. I always knew Earth had that charming middle-of-nowhere vibe. Additionally, continued the right mantis ball, still sounding like it had a helium habit, human conflict resolution techniques, while primitive, are of interest to our observers. Primitive? Arlen snorted. I prefer to think of it as quaintly direct, like using a sledgehammer to fix a watch. Consider this, the center mantis ball chimed in, a learning opportunity for the galaxy. Translation, Juno whispered. We're the guinea pigs in a high-stakes science experiment. Next up, dissecting a toaster to see what makes it angry. The tribunal seemed unfazed by their sarcasm. In fact, they seemed unfazed by most things, which probably came with the territory when you were part disco ball. They continued with their presentation, showing graphs and charts that presumably meant something important to someone somewhere, but not to Arlen and Juno. Earth's unique socio-political dynamics provide an excellent case study, intoned the left mantis ball. Your continual instability is fascinating. Fascinating like a train wreck, Arlen muttered. You can't look away even though you know how bad it is. The presentation dragged on, each point feeling like another nail in Earth's coffin. Arlen and Juno exchanged weary glances, the weight of the tribunal's verdict pressing down on them like a gravity well. We must delay their decision, Arlen whispered to Juno, his mind racing for a plan that wouldn't end with them being vaporized for insubordination. We need time to prepare. And how exactly do we do that? Juno asked, skepticism lacing her voice. Tell them Earth's allergic to uninvited guests. Arlen thought for a moment, then his eyes lit up with a spark of mischief. What if we request a formal review of the evidence? A bureaucratic stall tactic. You know how much they love their paperwork. You're assuming they have paperwork, Juno replied, but there was a glint of hope in her eyes. It's worth a shot, Arlen said, raising his voice to address the tribunal. Honorable tribunal, we request a thorough review of the evidence presented. Surely a decision of this magnitude deserves due diligence. The tribunal paused, their multifaceted eyes reflecting uncertainty for the first time. Maybe they weren't used to being asked for more paperwork. Maybe they just didn't expect their shiny slideshow to be questioned. This request is unusual, buzzed the center mantis ball. But not unprecedented, Arlen pressed, leaning into his role as the persistent diplomat. Such a comprehensive analysis would ensure all parties are fairly represented. We owe it to our people to consider every detail. A delay could impact the schedule, the right mantis ball noted, its voice carrying less helium this time, perhaps in reflection of genuine contemplation. Ah, the sacred schedule, Juno said under her breath, the true deity of bureaucrats everywhere. The tribunal conferred among themselves, their images flickering slightly as if they were more hologram than entity. Finally, they turned back to face Arlen and Juno. Very well, the center mantis ball conceded. We will grant a review, however, the delay will be brief. Prepare your evidence for the next session. Arlen nodded, masking his relief with the calm demeanor he'd perfected over years of diplomatic wrangling. Thank you, honorable tribunal. We shall return with our findings. As they exited the chamber, Arlen couldn't help but chuckle. Not quite a victory, but I'll take a stay of execution. Juno smirked, shaking her head. You know, for a diplomat, you're surprisingly good at pulling miracles out of your ass. Years of practice, Arlen replied, and a healthy fear of getting blown to smithereens. Back in the corridor, they paused to catch their breath. The delay was temporary, but it was a lifeline. A chance, however slim, to prepare Earth for what was coming. We need to get the best minds on this, Juno said, already in commander mode. Strategists, scientists, anyone who can help us buy more time. Right, Arlen agreed. And let's make sure they know just how little time we've got. They quickly made their way back to the command center, where the hustle and bustle had only intensified. It seemed the moment they left, Earth had decided to throw a party and everyone was invited. Not that any of them looked particularly thrilled to be there. "All right, listen up," Juno barked as they entered, commanding immediate attention. "We've managed to secure a delay, but it's not going to last long. We need every bit of intel we can get and a plan to make Earth less appealing than a tar pit on Venus." General Thorne stepped forward, looking as grizzled as ever. "What are we up against?" "A bunch of intergalactic looky-loos who think we're a sideshow act," Arlen replied. "But we've got a chance to show them what humans are made of. Blood, sweat, and a disturbing amount of caffeine." The janitor piped up, earning a collective chuckle from the room. As plans were set in motion, Arlen and Juno worked tirelessly with the others, their focus unwavering despite the chaos of their situation. The delay was a thin veneer of hope, but it was better than nothing, and they intended to make the most of it. "Think we can pull this off?" Juno asked Arlen during a rare quiet moment, her tone a mix of hope and resignation. "If anyone can, it's us," Arlen replied, his confidence as much for her benefit as it was for himself. "We've got stubbornness on our side. And if that fails, a really good sense of humor. Let's hope the universe appreciates sarcasm," Juno said with a wry grin. "Might be the only thing we can beat them with." As the clock ticked down, the command center buzzed with the energy of a hive preparing for a storm. Arlen and Juno were at its heart, leading the charge with the kind of determination that only comes when you've got nothing left to lose. "Whatever happens, remember this," Arlen said quietly to Juno, his voice steady amidst the storm. "We're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting for the right to tell the universe where it can shove its unwelcome war games." "And to think," Juno replied with a smirk, "all this without a single alien abduction story to our name." Together, they faced the impending storm with the kind of grim resolve that only humans could muster. And as the universe prepared to turn their world into a battlefield, they braced themselves for the struggle of a lifetime. Because if the universe wanted a fight, Earth's defenders were more than ready to deliver. The command center buzzed like a hornet's nest someone had knocked off balance with a well-aimed boot. Arlen and Juno stood at the epicenter, their frowns deepening as plans sputtered and caught like old engines refusing to turn over. If they were going to save Earth from becoming an intergalactic mosh pit, they needed to find a spark of genius amidst the chaos. "You ever get the feeling we're herding cats here?" Arlen mused, watching as a group of bickering scientists nearly came to blows over the proper use of a slide rule. "More like cats with opposable thumbs and a vendetta," Juno replied, a satisfied smirk tugging at her lips as she watched one scientist smack another over the head with a clipboard. "Looks like they're finally getting creative." "Creative's just another word for desperate," Arlen said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "And we're about as desperate as a spaceman out of air." Before they could dive further into the depths of their own sarcasm, a scuffle at the back of the room caught their attention. Two engineers shoved each other, each insisting their plan to disable the tribunal's holographic display was superior. One involved a complex algorithm, the other involved a hammer. "Break it up, you two," Juno barked, striding over. "We don't have time for a pissing contest. What's the issue?" "She thinks we can hack into their system," the first engineer, a wiry man with more hair than sense, said, casting a disdainful look at his colleague. "I say we just smash the damn thing." "Why not both?" Juno suggested, cutting through the tension with a flick of her eyes. "Hack it, and if that fails, smash it. We're not exactly brimming with options." "Or time," Arlen added, scanning the room with a calculating eye as he sidled up to Juno. "Speaking of which, I've been thinking about why the tribunal's so fixated on using Earth for their cosmic display of bad decision-making. There's got to be more to it." "You mean aside from the fact that we're apparently located on the universe's most conveniently placed ley lines?" Juno asked, her voice dripping with irony. "Exactly," Arlen said. "I've been wondering about their motives. All this fuss over our primitive conflict resolution strategies and prime real estate feels. Off like milk that's been left out too long, Juno agreed, nodding. But what are we missing? The room had started to quiet as people took notice of their conversation, ears pricking like a pack of hunting dogs catching a scent. One of the scientists, a gray-haired woman named Ree who had an aura of no-nonsense about her, stepped forward. "I've been looking into the tribunal's history," she said, her voice low. "Not all of it is above board. There are whispers of a synthetic religion gaining power in the outer systems. They might be using this tribunal decision to push their agenda." "A synthetic religion," Arlen repeated, eyebrows climbing as if they were trying to escape his face entirely. "What do these space zealots want with Earth?" "Leverage," Ree explained, her tone like someone delivering bad news to a patient convinced they had superhuman immunity. "Earth's strategic location makes it the perfect pawn in their plan to unite, or should I say, subjugate, the galaxy under their doctrine. And here I thought being turned into cosmic roadkill was our biggest worry," Juno sighed, folding her arms. "But no, it's always gotta be some power-hungry nutjobs looking to rewrite the universe's history." Arlen leaned against the nearest console, the weight of the revelation pulling him down. "We can't let them use Earth as a stepping stone in their quest for galactic domination. But how do we unmask this agenda?" "We need proof," Juno said, her eyes flickering with determination. "Something solid enough to make even the tribunal pay attention." "Proof sounds nice," Arlen mused, "but where do we find it? And without getting turned into space dust for poking around where we're not wanted." Ree nodded. "I've got a contact in the outer systems, a former believer turned whistleblower. If anyone can get us the dirt on this synthetic religion, it's them." "Can you reach them?" Juno asked. "Already sent out a quantum signal," Ree replied, with the kind of efficiency that would make a Swiss watch blush. "Just waiting on a reply." As they absorbed the implications of their new mission, the reality of their internal squabbles came rushing back in. Earth's own leaders were still bickering like spoiled kids over the last piece of cake, despite the looming threat of obliteration. "Any word from the Council?" Arlen asked Juno, knowing full well the answer but asking anyway. "Call it a masochistic streak." "They're about as cooperative as cats in a bathtub," Juno replied, shaking her head. "We've tried appealing to their sense of survival, but you'd think we were asking them to donate their kidneys." "You can't reason with people who think they are immortal," Arlen said, bitterness dripping from his words like venom. "If they can't see the writing on the wall, maybe we need to spell it out for them." Juno considered this, her mind racing through the possibilities. "Maybe a demonstration," she suggested. "Something to scare them straight." "Scare tactics are risky," Arlen said, tapping his chin, "but it might be the only language they understand." The room was rallying around them now, united by the common threat of extinction. There was a renewed sense of urgency, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could pull off the impossible. "All right," Juno said, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "Let's get to work. We need ideas for a demonstration that'll knock some sense into the Council. Something they can't ignore." "We could simulate a tribunal attack," suggested a logistics officer with more enthusiasm than sense. "Make it look like we're already under siege." "Risky," Arlen said, but there was a gleam in his eye. "But risky might be what we need. If we can control the narrative, show them the stakes without actually giving the tribunal a reason to nuke us, it might just work." As they hashed out the details, a sudden beep interrupted their planning, Ree's console flashing with an incoming message from her contact. The room fell silent, all eyes on Ree as she opened the communication. Her face was unreadable, a mask of concentration as the transmission played out. Finally, she turned to Arlen and Juno. "It's worse than we thought," she said, her voice strained. "The tribunal's decision isn't just about Earth. The synthetic religion is planning a full-scale uprising. They're going to use the battleground as a rallying point, a show of power to draw in support from other systems." Juno clenched her fists, anger flaring in her eyes. So we're not just fighting for Earth, we're fighting to stop a galactic war. Exactly, reconfirmed. If they succeed, it won't just be Earth at risk. It'll be the entire galaxy. The weight of the revelation settled over them like a shroud, their mission more critical than ever. They had to stop the tribunal, expose the synthetic religion's plot, and somehow unite Earth's fractious leaders in the process. "Looks like we've got our work cut out for us," Arlen said, trying to inject some levity into the grim situation. "Anyone got a spare miracle lying around?" "We'll make our own miracles," Juno replied, determination hardening her features. "And if the universe thinks it can push us around, it's got another thing coming." As the final plans were set in motion, Arlen and Juno prepared to face the storm. They were standing on the precipice of a battle that could reshape the galaxy, and they intended to fight like hell to keep Earth off the cosmic chopping block. Because if being the universe's punching bag had taught them anything, it was that humans could be stubborn, clever, and downright infuriating when their backs were against the wall. And sometimes, that was enough to change the world. The conference room smelled like someone had tried to mask the scent of panic with cheap cologne, and it wasn't working. Arlen Venn pinched his nose as he surveyed the scene. Scientists and engineers, those supposed paragons of intellect, were at each other's throats again, squabbling over whose plan to save Earth from the tribunal's cosmic deathmatch was the least idiotic. "Why do I feel like a kindergarten teacher on caffeine withdrawal?" Arlen muttered, turning to Juno Tresk, who was busy rolling her eyes so hard it was a wonder they didn't pop out of her head. "Because you've got a bunch of adults acting like toddlers fighting over a spork," Juno replied, her smirk as constant as ever. "And I hate to break it to you, but you're not getting a break anytime soon." "Lovely," Arlen sighed. "What's next?" "Someone suggesting we sacrifice a goat to the space gods." "Could be worse," Juno said. "They could actually be serious about it." Before Arlen could retort, the door slammed open, revealing the scientist with a knack for no-nonsense and a penchant for bad news. She strode in like she owned the place, which, given the chaos, might as well have been true. "We've got a problem," announced with all the subtlety of a meteor strike. "Sabotage." The room went silent, the collective intake of breath echoing like an asthmatic vacuum cleaner. Arlen raised an eyebrow, curious despite himself. "Sabotage, you say? Who'd want to make this mess even messier?" "Oh, I don't know," Rhys said, her voice laced with sarcasm. "Maybe the same synthetic religion nutjobs we just found out want to turn the galaxy into their personal playground." The tension in the room ratcheted up a notch, like a noose tightening around their necks. Juno folded her arms, leaning against a console with a casualness that belied the danger. "So, we've got traitors in our midst. Anyone feel like playing a game of Spot the Zealot?" A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room, the kind that masked fear with humor because the alternative was too bleak to consider. "We need to find out who's behind it and fast," Arlen said, his mind racing. "Before they make sure our defense strategies end up more useless than a screen door on a spaceship." Rhys nodded. "Agreed. I've already started a trace on the systems, but we need to keep everything under wraps. Panic's the last thing we need more of." The room seemed to collectively nod, grim determination setting in. It was almost comforting in a way to know they were united in their desire to avoid becoming cosmic debris. Juno pushed off the console, her eyes scanning the room with the intensity of a hawk eyeing prey. "All right, listen up," she said, authority in every syllable. "We're going to double-check every system, every plan. No stone unturned. And if anyone so much as sneezes suspiciously, I want to know about it. I'll pretend to be surprised when someone inevitably tries to blame the janitor," Arlen quipped, earning a snort from Juno. The gravity of their situation hung over them, but they were nothing if not stubborn. After all, if Earth was going down, it wouldn't be without a fight, and a damn good one at that. As they set to work, Juno pulled Arlen aside, lowering her voice. "We need more than just a witch hunt," she said. "We need something big, something that'll throw the tribunal off their game." I'm all ears, Arlen replied, intrigued. You got a plan, or is this where you tell me to start praying? Praying's for the desperate, Juno said, a glint of mischief in her eyes. I've got something better, Earth's cultural chaos. Our creativity might just be our ticket. You're saying we throw a festival? Arlen asked, eyebrows arched. Not quite, Juno said. But think about it, our diversity, our tech, all those things the tribunal thinks make us primitive. We use them, we make them work for us. And how, pray tell, do we do that? Arlen asked, genuinely curious as Juno's plan began to unfold. We confuse them, Juno explained, gesturing animatedly. We mix our strategies, use tech and cultural nuances. While they're trying to parse our so-called inferiority, we hit them where it hurts. Arlen grinned. You want to bewilder the most advanced beings in the galaxy with our backward methods. They won't see it coming, Juno smirked back. They think they know what to expect. Let's give them a surprise they'll never forget. The idea was insane, bordering on genius, which in Arlen's experience was par for the course when it came to saving Earth. All right, he said, clapping his hands. Let's get to it. Time to teach the tribunal why you don't underestimate humans. With a plan taking shape, they rallied the room, laying out their unorthodox strategy. The skepticism was palpable at first, but as Juno detailed her vision, doubt turned to excitement, a chance to turn the tables, to fight on their terms. Remember, Juno reminded them, we're not just defending Earth. We're defending the right to be who we are. Messy, chaotic, wonderfully unpredictable. That's our advantage. Rejoined them, her face serious but eyes alight with the possibility. I've got some contacts who can get us what we need. Tech, information, even cultural artifacts. Perfect, Juno said, nodding. Let's make sure every piece of this plan is as unpredictable as we are. As the room buzzed with renewed energy, Arlen couldn't help but feel a strange sense of hope. Not the naive, fairy tale kind, but the gritty, hard-earned kind that came from knowing the odds and fighting anyway. They might be outmatched, outgunned, and out of time, but if the universe thought it could write them off, it was in for a rude awakening. Because if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was defying expectations in the most spectacular ways possible. And as Juno and Arlen prepared to lead their ragtag band of defenders, they knew one thing for certain. The tribunal might have chosen Earth as their battleground, but they'd soon learn that humans weren't just fighters. They were survivors, and that was a lesson worth teaching. The command center buzzed with frenetic energy as people scurried about like ants in a disturbed colony. Arlen led Juno through the chaos, their path lit by the flickering glow of holographic displays projecting a cacophony of data. The air was tinged with that familiar scent of burnt coffee and desperation, a scent that had become almost comforting in its consistency. As they dodged a particularly zealous technician wielding a soldering iron like a lightsaber, Arlen turned to Juno. You sure this'll work? Mixing cultures and tech sounds like a recipe for disaster. Disaster's just another word for opportunity, Juno replied, her smirk firmly in place. Besides, we've got nothing to lose but our already questionable dignity. Speak for yourself, Arlen replied, grinning. My dignity packed up and left a long time ago. They reached the central console where Ree was already waiting, fingers dancing over the keys with a speed that would make a pianist weep with envy. We've got a lead on the saboteur, she said without preamble. Hit me, Juno said, leaning in. Ree pointed to a blinking dot on the screen. Signals coming from one of the engineering bays. Seems someone thought they could mask their trail with old Earth jazz. Jazz? Really? Arlen scoffed. What's next they try to blend in with disco, Juno chuckled. Jazz is classic, predictable even, which means our saboteur's either nostalgic or just plain stupid. Or both, Ree said, turning back to the console. I've locked the bay down. If we hurry, we can catch them in the act. Let's do it, Juno said, her voice steely. Arlen, you're with me. Ree, keep an eye out for any more surprises. As they made their way to the engineering bay, the tension in the air crackled like static electricity. Arlen and Juno exchanged a glance, each knowing that this could be a turning point. Inside that bay lay not just a saboteur but potentially the key to their survival. The bay doors loomed ahead, a hulking mass of metal that seemed to promise both answers and danger. Arlen punched the access code, the door sliding open with a hiss that echoed ominously in the corridor. Inside, the bay was a mess of cables, tools, and half-assembled machinery. The kind of place that would give a neat freak nightmares for weeks. In the center stood a figure, their back turned, fiddling with a device that looked suspiciously like a bomb. "Hey there," Arlen called out, his tone casual despite the situation. "You do know it's not bring your bomb to work day, right?" The figure froze, then slowly turned, revealing a young woman with wild hair and eyes that darted like a trapped animal. "You're too late," she said, her voice defiant despite the tremor in it. Juno stepped forward, her expression a mix of curiosity and determination. "Why do it? What's in it for you?" The woman laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You wouldn't understand the tribunal's promise. It's more than this rock can offer." "Ah, promises from intergalactic overlords," Arlen said. "Always so reliable." "Shut up," the woman snapped, but there was a hint of doubt in her eyes now. "They're going to reshape the universe, order from chaos." "Order," Juno said, her voice sharp. "You mean control, subjugation. Is that really what you want?" The woman's lips pressed into a thin line, her resolve wavering. "It's better than oblivion." "Is it?" Juno pressed, her voice relentless. "Because from where I'm standing, fighting for chaos looks a hell of a lot better than living under a dictator's boot." The room was silent save for the hum of machinery, the woman's internal conflict waging war visible in her eyes. Finally, her shoulders slumped, defeat and revelation mingling in her expression. "Fine," she said, stepping away from the device. "You're right, I thought it was the only way." "There's always another way," Arlen said, moving to secure the device. "And trust me, it usually doesn't involve detonating yourself into stardust." With the immediate threat neutralized, they escorted the woman back to the command center. She walked with eyes downcast, a prisoner of her own choices. In the command center, Ree was waiting, her expression unreadable. "Good work," she said simply. "Now let's make sure this doesn't happen again." "Agreed," Juno said, turning to the woman. "Help us. Show us what you know and maybe we can stop this madness." The woman hesitated but nodded, her decision made. "I'll help. Anything to stop them." As the team got to work, dissecting the information and adjusting their plans, Arlen leaned back, watching the room with a mix of hope and cynicism. They had a long road ahead, but at least now they had a fighting chance. And as they prepared for the next battle in this cosmic game of chess, Arlen allowed himself a small, wry smile. Because if there was one thing humans were good at, it was defying the odds in the most spectacularly messy way possible. The command center felt like a sauna set to chaos, with the usual suspects milling around while a holographic display of Earth flickered ominously in the background. Arlen navigated through the frantic mess, as if he were a seasoned firefighter dodging flames made of red tape and doomed hope. Juno, her ever-present smirk now looking more like a permanent fixture, was in the middle of a heated discussion with Ree. The air was thick with tension, like a cheap motel room during a police raid. "Explain it to me again," Juno was saying, her voice laced with a cocktail of frustration and sarcasm. "How exactly did the tribunal decide to fast-track humanity into extinction?" Ree, the bearer of bad news wearing a lab coat, looked like she could use a vacation to a place where the universe wasn't perpetually on fire. "Apparently, they've expedited the decision process. Something about wanting to streamline operations. Translation, they've put us on the express train to oblivion." "Wonderful," Arlen interjected, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I love when genocidal maniacs adopt efficiency." "They're claiming it's a scheduling conflict," Ree added dryly, as if discussing a minor inconvenience like running out of milk, not the end of the world. "Apparently there's a sale on galactic domination, and they didn't want to miss it." Arlen glanced at Juno, who wore the expression of someone who'd just been told their favorite TV show was canceled mid-cliffhanger. This means we're out of time for the grand festival of human oddities, doesn't it? Juno shrugged, though the action was more resigned than anything. Seems the universe has a twisted sense of humor. Or in our case, none at all. The announcement of the accelerated timeline hit the command center like a bomb, one that didn't explode but instead oozed despair and panic. Conversations turned into arguments, and arguments into a cacophony of chaos. If anyone had a handy can opener, they could have used it to unleash a fresh batch of desperation. Arlen tried to keep his voice steady as he addressed the room. All right, folks, let's focus on not becoming cosmic roadkill. Suggestions. A brave soul from the back chimed in, voice quivering with uncertainty. We could try negotiating again. Arlen snorted, his cynicism showing through like a bad poker face. Sure, let's ask the tribunal nicely to not wipe us out. Maybe they'll throw in a cookie and a pat on the head. Ree stepped in, a frown etched permanently on her face. Negotiation isn't on the table, Arlen. It's either we make this plan work or we get comfortable with the idea of non-existence. Great, Juno muttered, rubbing the bridge of her nose. Anyone else got ideas that don't involve us becoming space debris? There was silence, the kind that felt heavy and oppressive, like a bad karaoke rendition of Staying Alive. The command center seemed to collectively hold its breath, waiting for a miracle or at least a half-decent idea. All right, Arlen said finally. Time to roll with the punches and improvise like our lives depend on it, because they do. They regrouped around the central console, the holographic Earth spinning lazily like it didn't have a care in the galaxy. Ree brought up a map overlay, highlighting Earth's most vulnerable ley lines, the cosmic equivalent of bullseyes. We need to disrupt their ability to focus on Earth, Ree began, her voice all business. Any ideas on how to make their job harder? Sure, Juno said, her eyes narrowing in thought. We throw everything at them, all the cultural peculiarities, the tech, even the kitchen sink. Confuse the hell out of them. Sounds like a plan, Arlen agreed. But we need to step it up. If they are speeding things up, we have to be faster, more unpredictable. Ree nodded, her analytical mind already racing ahead. We'll need to modify the tech and cultural artifacts, make them seem erratic and unmanageable. Perfect, Juno replied, her smirk making a comeback. Let's give them a taste of chaos, served with a side of human ingenuity. As they dove into the preparations, a sense of grim determination filled the room. They were outnumbered, outmanned, and definitely out of their minds, but if they were going down, they'd go down swinging. The command center buzzed with frantic energy as everyone set about their tasks, a hive of activity with the imminent threat of being smoked out. Arlen moved through the organized chaos, checking on progress, his expression a mix of resolve and gallows humor. He found Juno tinkering with a piece of equipment that looked suspiciously like a blender mated with a circuit board. What's that supposed to do? Make margaritas and confuse aliens? Something like that, she replied, not missing a beat. It's a cognitive dissonance generator, or, as I like to call it, a WTF machine. It'll blast them with random cultural inputs and make them question reality. Sounds perfect, Arlen said, grinning despite himself. If we're lucky, they'll think twice about fast-tracking humanity onto the extinct list. Let's hope, Juno said, her tone hopeful but realistic. Otherwise, it's been fun knowing you. Arlen moved on, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down like a lead blanket. He found Ree in her usual spot, eyes glued to the holographic display as she adjusted parameters with the precision of a surgeon. "We ready to cause some intergalactic confusion?" he asked, leaning against the console with feigned nonchalance. "Almost," Ree replied, not looking up. "But I've got to warn you, this could go spectacularly wrong." "Spectacularly wrong is our specialty," Arlen said, a touch of dark humor in his voice. "Worst-case scenario, we end up as a moral lesson for other civilizations." Ree gave a small, tired smile. Always the optimist, Arlen. The hours ticked by with the relentless pace of a countdown to disaster. Every minute felt borrowed, stolen from a fate that was all too willing to claim it back. Yet, amidst the chaos and clamor, the team found a rhythm, a grim resolve that bordered on defiance. As the command center hummed with activity, the impossible task at hand seemed almost manageable. They were a hodgepodge of humanity's finest messmakers, and if anyone could pull off the impossible, it was them. In the final hours before the tribunal's accelerated deadline, Arlen gathered everyone for one last pep talk. The room quieted, anticipation hanging thick in the air like a storm about to break. "This is it," he began, looking around at the faces of people who had become more than just colleagues. "We've been dealt a bad hand, but that's never stopped us before. We're going to show them that human chaos isn't just a weakness, it's our greatest strength." Juno stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. "We're up against the most advanced beings in the galaxy, and they think they know what to expect from us. Let's prove them wrong." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, a shared understanding that they were on the brink of something monumental. Failure was not an option, not when the stakes were this high. Ree, ever the pragmatist, added her 2 cents. "Remember, whatever happens, we're doing this for more than just survival. We're doing it to show them what it means to be human, flaws, chaos, and all." With that, they dispersed, each person returning to their task with renewed vigor. It was a fool's hope, a desperate gamble, but it was all they had. Arlen watched them go, a sense of grim pride swelling in his chest. They were ready for whatever came next, even if it meant going down in a blaze of glory. As the final preparations were made, the command center fell into a tense silence, the calm before the storm. Arlen and Juno stood side by side, watching the holographic display of Earth, a fragile blue dot in the vastness of space. "Think we'll pull it off?" Arlen asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Juno gave a small, crooked smile. "If we don't, at least we'll go out with style." Arlen chuckled, a low, humorless sound. "Here's to hoping the universe appreciates a good show." And as the minutes dwindled away, leaving them on the precipice of the unknown, one thing was certain. Come what may, they'd face it together. Humans might be flawed, chaotic, and hopelessly unpredictable, but they were also resilient. And that, Arlen thought, was worth everything. Arlen then stared at the command center's interface, a digital monstrosity that might have been designed by a committee of caffeinated octopuses. The display blinked with a dozen urgent warnings, all screaming in a symphony of annoyance. He couldn't help but think of it as a temperamental toddler with a penchant for chaos, the kind of chaos that might just get them all killed. Juno Tresk was beside him, tapping away at a console with the nonchalance of a cat swatting at a laser pointer. She had the enviable talent of appearing unfazed even when the universe was set to implode, a gift perhaps born of too many close scrapes and the general malaise of having no faith in authority. Arlen sighed, rubbing his temples. "Remind me again why we haven't all taken up careers as hermits." "Because hermits don't get to screw with intergalactic politics," Juno replied with a smirk, not bothering to look up. "And you'd miss the rush of living a day away from oblivion." "Speak for yourself," Arlen muttered. "I'd take a nice, boring day any millennium." Ree, ever the bringer of delightful news, approached. Her lab coat flapped around her like the wings of a particularly disenchanted bat. "I've got something," she said, her tone suggesting that what she really wanted was a stiff drink. "Something good, I hope," Arlen said, though he wasn't holding his breath. "Or are we about to find out that the universe has even more inventive ways to screw us over?" Ree's lips quirked into a grim approximation of a smile. "You could say that. I found a flaw in the tribunal's synthetic religion plots." Juno raised an eyebrow. "You mean the same synthetic religion that's about as friendly as a nest of vipers in a blender?" "The very one," Ree confirmed, pulling up a display. "Turns out their foundation is far more fragile than they let on. The entire system's built on a series of logic loops that rely on adherence to a core set of doctrines." Arlen leaned in, curiosity piqued. "And we can exploit that how?" "Introduce a paradox," Ree explained, her eyes gleaming with a rare touch of excitement. A simple contradiction in their programming could cause a cascading failure. Think of it as a theological banana peel. Juno grinned. So we throw a wrench in their cosmic gears and watch the fireworks. Exactly, Ree nodded. Though it'll take precise timing and a bit of luck, but it's our best shot at sowing enough confusion to buy us time. Arlen felt a flicker of hope, a dangerous emotion, but one he was willing to entertain if it meant avoiding extinction. All right then, he said, feeling a new sense of purpose. Let's give them a crisis of faith they won't forget. The command center buzzed to life as the team set about rallying Earth's disparate factions. It was a spectacle of organized chaos, the kind that might make lesser beings run for cover. But Arlen and his ragtag crew were no strangers to chaos. They thrived in it, like weeds in a neglected garden. Juno took charge, her voice cutting through the noise like an electric knife. Listen up, folks. We've got a plan that involves sticking it to the tribunal's synthetic religion, but we need everyone on board pulling together or we're toast. A murmur went through the crowd, a mix of skepticism and begrudging acceptance. Arlen stepped up, adding his own voice to the fray. Look, I get it. We're all terrified, but we've got a chance here. If we can unite, even for a moment, we might just pull this off. There were nods, hesitant but growing in number. Ree set to work, coordinating the technical aspects of their plan, her fingers flying over the controls with a surgeon's precision. Arlen watched her, marveling at the tenacity that had carried them this far. In the midst of it all, Juno was a force of nature, rallying support from Earth's various factions. Her charisma was a battering ram against the walls of doubt, her words igniting a spark of rebellious spirit among those who had long felt abandoned by fate. We've been kicked around by the universe long enough, Juno proclaimed, her voice a rallying cry. Time to show them what happens when humanity decides to fight back. The response was a roar of agreement, a patchwork quilt of defiance stitched together by desperation and hope. Arlen felt a grin tugging at his lips, the kind of reckless joy that came with knowing you were about to do something incredibly stupid and possibly world-saving. As the final preparations came together, Arlen took a moment to appreciate the madness of it all. They were a ragtag band of misfits, staring down the barrel of cosmic annihilation with nothing more than grit and ingenuity. But maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Ready? Juno asked, her eyes gleaming with a determination that bordered on reckless. Ready as I'll ever be, Arlen replied, the weight of their plan settling comfortably on his shoulders. Let's give them a crisis of faith that'll make their heads spin faster than a black hole on speed. Ree was already in position, fingers poised over the controls. On your mark, she said, her voice steady, a rock amidst the storm. Arlen nodded, heart pounding in his chest with a primal rhythm that matched the countdown clock. Let's light this candle. With a flick of Ree's wrist, the plan was set in motion. The command center erupted in a cacophony of alarms and lights, a digital tempest that mirrored the chaos brewing in the tribunal's synthetic systems. It was a symphony of chaos, an overture of rebellion that sang of humanity's refusal to go quietly into the night. At first, there was nothing but silence, a tense pause that stretched like taffy. Then, like a dam bursting, the tribunal's systems began to fail. Alerts flashed across the displays, 1,000 red flags waving in a digital storm. Juno watched, her smirk widening into a full-blown grin. Looks like we're giving them a theological headache they won't soon forget. Arlen couldn't help but laugh, a sound born of relief and disbelief. If this doesn't make them reconsider, nothing will. The tribunal's chamber, once an impenetrable bastion of order, was now a maelstrom of confusion. The flaw in their synthetic religion had opened a chasm of doubt, one that threatened to swallow their entire operation whole. As the minutes ticked by, a new sense of hope began to emerge. It was fragile, a fledgling thing born of chaos and desperation, but it was there, and it was spreading. Arlen watched as the factions rallied together, their differences momentarily forgotten in the face of a common threat. Looks like we're not done yet, Juno said, her voice tinged with that familiar blend of sarcasm and determination. Far from it, Arlen agreed, feeling the weight of their collective struggle lift ever so slightly. But maybe we've got a fighting chance after all. With their plan in motion and the tribunal reeling, the command center felt like a powder keg on the brink of explosion. And yet, amidst the chaos, there was a sense of unity, a shared understanding that they were all fighting for the same thing: survival against all odds. As the clock continued its relentless countdown, Arlen felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were flawed and imperfect, but they were human, and that, he realized, was their greatest strength. And with that thought in mind, he stepped forward, ready to face whatever came next. "Let's show them what it means to be human," Arlen said, his voice carrying through the command center like a beacon of defiance. Chaos, flaws, and all. And with that, they braced themselves for the next phase of their desperate gamble, knowing full well that the outcome was anything but certain. But if they were going down, they would do so with the kind of defiance that could only come from a species that refused to be beaten, even by the vast, uncaring universe. The command center was alight with activity, every screen and console alive with the frenetic energy of their struggle. Arlen watched as the team worked, each person playing their part in this grand act of rebellion. It was a sight to behold, a testament to the indomitable spirit of a species that refused to go quietly into the cosmic night. As the minutes stretched into eternity, Arlen found himself standing shoulder to shoulder with Juno and Ree, the three of them watching the chaos unfold with a mix of awe and grim satisfaction. "It's beautiful in a destructive kind of way," Juno mused, her eyes glued to the display. Ree nodded, her expression one of quiet pride. "We've done the impossible before. No reason we can't do it again." Arlen chuckled, a dark, humorless sound. "Here's hoping the universe is in the mood for a miracle." Together, they watched as the tribunal struggled to regain control, their once immaculate systems now a tangled mess of contradiction and confusion. It was a small victory, but in that moment, it felt monumental. And as the dust began to settle and the chaos reached a crescendo, Arlen could almost believe that they might just pull this off. It was a fool's hope, but it was hope nonetheless, and for now, that was enough. As the team continued their work, Arlen felt a sense of camaraderie that was as unexpected as it was welcome. They were a motley crew, bound together by circumstance and necessity, but in their shared struggle they had found something more, something that transcended their individual differences and united them in a common cause. And so, with the odds stacked against them and the fate of humanity hanging in the balance, they pressed on, determined to prove that even in the darkest of times, there was still a spark of light. For Arlen, Juno, and Ree, this was their moment, a chance to show the universe what it truly meant to be human. Flawed, chaotic, and irrepressibly defiant, they were ready to face whatever came next together. The command center buzzed with the frantic energy of a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Monitors blinked with warnings like they were practicing for a seizure competition, and somewhere in the chaos, the coffee machine was on its fifth existential crisis of the day. Arlen Venn stood at the heart of it all, a general of the absurd, orchestrating this symphony of misfits and malfunctioning machinery. "There goes another one," Juno Tresk muttered, gesturing towards a monitor that had just decided it preferred to communicate in hieroglyphics. "Lovely. Just what we need. A technical support call to ancient Egypt," Arlen replied, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He ran a hand through his hair, already feeling the weight of impending doom like an unwanted hat. Ree was at the controls, fingers dancing over buttons with the dexterity of a concert pianist and the focus of a caffeine addict on a deadline. She was the brains behind this operation, and every time she cracked a smile, Arlen wondered if she secretly thrived on chaos, or maybe she just had a really good dental plan. The tribunal's synthetic religion was their target, and their plan was to expose its flaw like a plumber shining a flashlight down a pipe to reveal a family of raccoons. The trick was to do it without getting clawed. The tribunal was still reeling from their earlier attack, scrambling to piece together their shattered systems. It was the perfect time to press their advantage, and Arlen knew it. "All right, people," Arlen shouted over the noise. "Let's show the tribunal what Earth's finest have to offer. Spoiler alert, it's a whole lot of stubbornness and questionable logic. Basically what got us into this mess in the first place," Juno quipped, her permanent smirk firmly in place. "Hey, never underestimate the power of human stupidity." "It's got us this far, hasn't it?" Arlen shot back, grinning despite himself. The banter was a thin veneer over their anxiety, a way to keep the reality of their situation at bay. Ree cleared her throat, drawing their attention. "I've isolated the core doctrine loop. One good push and it'll be like watching a house of cards in a wind tunnel." "Cool," Juno said, her eyes glinting with mischief. "I love a good implosion." "Especially when it's not us for once." Arlen nodded, feeling the rush of adrenaline that came with the prospect of turning the tables on their oppressors. "Let's give the tribunal a taste of our chaotic genius, then." With a synchronized nod that felt more like a battle cry, Ree initiated the final sequence. The command center's lights dimmed momentarily, a dramatic effect Arlen couldn't help but appreciate. It was like they were about to put on the universe's most high-stakes light show. The digital storm descended upon the tribunal's systems with all the subtlety of a bull in a china shop. Alerts flashed like fireworks, and the air was thick with the sound of panicked alien bureaucrats trying to untangle the theological mess Arlen and his crew had unleashed. Ree's fingers flew over the controls as if she were conducting a digital orchestra, each keystroke a note in their symphony of sabotage. And then, there it was. The heart of the tribunal's synthetic religion laid bare on the holographic display, glitching like an old TV set struggling with reception. "There it is," Ree breathed, her voice tinged with the awe of a scientist witnessing a breakthrough. "Their entire belief system riding on a paradox. Talk about putting all your eggs in one basket," Juno said, shaking her head. "Bad move, tribunal." Arlen stepped forward, his heart pounding with the thrill of the fight. "All right, folks, time to give them a show they won't forget." With a flourish that would make a stage magician jealous, Ree deployed the paradox. The holographic display flickered, the system struggling to reconcile the contradiction they'd introduced. Arlen held his breath, waiting for the inevitable crash. And then, like a chain reaction, the tribunal's system spiraled out of control, logic loops collapsing in on themselves like dying stars. The chamber where the Alioth tribunal convened was bathed in red emergency lights, the perfect backdrop for their unraveling dogma. Juno let out a low whistle. "Look at that. The universe's most advanced civilization brought to its knees by a little creative thinking." "Creative thinking and a lot of caffeine," Ree corrected, not missing a beat. Arlen chuckled darkly. Who knew all those years of arguing on the internet would finally pay off? Take that, universe. In the tribunal's chamber, the alien judges were in chaos, their holographic faces flickering with confusion and rage. The flaw in their synthetic religion was exposed for all to see, a cosmic embarrassment that was impossible to ignore. As the chaos unfolded, Earth's representatives seized the moment. They presented their case with a fervor that was equal parts righteous indignation and desperate plea. Arlen watched from the command center, his heart swelling with a pride he hadn't realized he was capable of feeling in such a dire situation. Ree, Juno, and Arlen were in it together, watching as humanity's defiance played out on the grandest stage imaginable. It was a gamble of epic proportions, but as Ree had reminded them more than once, sometimes the impossible just needed a good shove. "And there it is," Juno said, pointing at the display where Earth's arguments were being broadcast to the tribunal. "Cultural resilience, folks. We might argue about pineapple on pizza, but when it comes to survival, we're all in." Arlen grinned. "If we get through this, remind me to finally try that pineapple pizza." "You haven't lived until you've tasted the sweet chaos of a Hawaiian," Juno quipped. Ree was more focused, watching the tribunal's response like a hawk. "We've shown them our hand. Now let's see if they're willing to fold." For a moment, it looked as though the tribunal was on the brink of declaring Earth a lost cause. But then, slowly, the tide began to turn. In the wake of their exposed flaw, the tribunal had no choice but to reconsider. One of the alien judges, a grim-looking creature with eyes like molten metal, turned its gaze towards the holographic representation of Earth. "Perhaps," it intoned, its voice a rumble like distant thunder, "there is more to humanity than we anticipated." "Understatement of the millennium," Juno muttered, crossing her arms with satisfaction. The tribunal conferred, their debate more muted now, subdued in the face of undeniable evidence that their own creation was flawed. Arlen watched with a mix of hope and dread, knowing that the outcome of their gambit was far from certain. But as the minutes ticked by, a sense of cautious optimism began to filter through the command center. The tribunal's once imperious demeanor had softened, and though they were still far from allies, it was clear that their perspective on humanity had shifted. "We might just pull this off," Ree said softly, her eyes never leaving the display. "If we can convince them that we're worth the trouble." Arlen nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. They'd come so far, fought so hard to reach this point. Even if the odds were still stacked against them, they'd bought themselves time to show the tribunal that humanity was more than the sum of its flaws. "We've made our case," Arlen said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty swirling around them. "Now let's see if we can convince them to give us a fighting chance." The minutes stretched into an eternity, the tribunal's decision hanging in the balance like a sword poised above their heads. But amidst the tension, Arlen found solace in the knowledge that they'd done everything they could. They'd faced the darkness with defiance and ingenuity, and whatever happened next, they'd done it together. "We're not done yet," Juno said, her eyes alight with that familiar, reckless determination. "Far from it," Arlen agreed, grateful for the solidarity that had carried them this far. "But maybe, just maybe, we've got a fighting chance after all." With the tribunal's attention firmly fixed on Earth, the command center felt like the eye of a storm, calm amidst the swirling chaos. Arlen stood shoulder to shoulder with his companions, ready to face whatever came next. And as the tribunal's deliberations continued, Arlen couldn't help but smile. They were a ragtag group, defying the odds and challenging the universe, but in that moment they were more than just survivors. They were the embodiment of humanity's indomitable spirit. "We've shown them what it means to be human," Arlen said, his voice carrying a note of defiance. "Chaos, flaws, and all. Whatever the tribunal decided, they'd already won a victory of sorts. They'd reminded the universe that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, and they'd done it with humor, grit, and a healthy dose of irreverence." And as the final decision loomed, Arlen felt a flicker of hope, a dangerous emotion, but one he was willing to embrace. After all, if there was one thing humanity was good at, it was refusing to back down when it mattered most. The tribunal's deliberations dragged on like a bad hangover, the kind that makes you swear off cheap whiskey forever. Not that Arlen expected a quick decision. The universe's most advanced collection of bureaucrats weren't known for their speed. Their systems flickered and spat like old tube TV, and Arlen couldn't help but feel a certain satisfaction. After all, they'd been the ones to pull the plug, metaphorically speaking. "Think they're going to keep us hanging forever?" Juno asked, her smirk as indelible as ever. "Wouldn't be surprised," Arlen replied. "Galactic justice moves at glacial speed just like our own courts. Only difference is here we don't have to deal with parking tickets." "Upside of intergalactic doom," Juno agreed. "No petty fines." Ree glanced up from her station where she'd been monitoring the tribunal's frantic struggle to restore order. "They're nearing a decision," she said, with the kind of focus that made her invaluable. "If I had to guess, they are about to decide if we're worth the paperwork." Arlen chuckled darkly. "And we all know how much they love paperwork." "I'm sure we've given them enough to last a few millennia," Bet they'll wish they'd chosen to obliterate us, Juno said, crossing her arms and leaning back with a grin. Imagine the reports they'll have to file. Poor sods. The command center was quieter now, the earlier chaos settling into a tense waiting game. There was nothing more they could do but hope the seeds they'd sown would blossom into something other than their own demise. It was a gamble, and Arlen was well aware they'd probably only gotten this far on luck and sheer audacity. Finally, the tribunal's holographic display stabilized, the flickering judges' faces now resolute, though still carrying the weight of their impromptu existential crisis. The grim-looking judge with molten metal eyes locked onto Earth's representation. After considerable deliberation, it began, voice like gravel grinding underfoot, we find that the potential benefits of allowing humanity to continue outweigh the risks. Translation: You're free to keep screwing up your own planet, but we'll be watching, Juno said, as though narrating a bad reality TV show. Arlen couldn't suppress a grin. Isn't that what we've always wanted? Just a little bit more rope to hang ourselves with, the judge continued, oblivious to the human snark. This tribunal will establish a permanent observation post to monitor Earth's development. Additional measures will be in place to ensure compliance with intergalactic standards. Basically, cosmic probation, Ree murmured, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. Could be worse. Could be vaporized, Juno quipped. So I'd say we came out on top. Arlen shook his head, disbelief mingling with relief. We did it. We actually made them blink first. Who would have thought that a handful of humans could derail the tribunal's well-oiled machine? But here they were, still standing and with a glimmer of hope for Earth's future. The tribunal might not be handing out participation trophies, but they hadn't chosen to annihilate the planet either. Small victories, as they say. The chamber lights brightened, signaling the end of the tribunal's session. Their holograms flickered off, leaving the command center in an odd, almost serene quiet. Arlen turned to his team, pride swelling in his chest. Good job, everyone. We've bought Earth some time. Time and a headache for those bureaucrats, Juno added, never one to miss a chance for a parting shot. The weight of the moment settled over them, a mix of triumph and exhaustion. They'd faced the unimaginable and come out the other side, frazzled, sure, but alive and kicking. Arlen knew there was more work ahead, more battles to fight, but for now, he was content to savor the victory. Let's get out of here, he said. Grab a drink, maybe some of that pineapple pizza you keep raving about. Finally joining the enlightened, Juno teased as they headed for the exit. Figured I might as well try the chaos you guys keep raving about, Arlen replied with a chuckle. Can't be worse than facing down a galactic tribunal. Ree followed, her expression thoughtful. We've got a lot of rebuilding to do, but we've shown the universe we're not to be underestimated. Yeah, Arlen agreed, pausing to glance back at the command center's blinking lights. We might be stubborn, reckless, and prone to arguing about the finer points of pizza toppings, but when it counts, we know how to stick together. The trio walked out into the corridor, the slight tension in their shoulders easing as the doors closed behind them. They'd done the impossible and proved that humanity wasn't ready to be written off. Sure, the universe might still see them as a pack of unruly toddlers, but they'd shown they were more than just primitive creatures squabbling on a blue dot. We should probably come up with a plan for dealing with all those alien observers, Ree said as they walked. Maybe we charge admission, Juno joked. If they're gonna watch, they might as well pay for the privilege. Could fund a whole new space program with that kind of money, Arlen added. Or at least a decent supply of coffee for the command center. They shared a laugh, the kind that comes from shared relief and the bond forged in the fire of adversity. For all their cynicism and snark, there was an undeniable camaraderie between them, a solidarity that had carried them through the darkest moments. As they reached the exit, Arlen paused, taking in the sight of Earth rotating peacefully on the holographic display. It was a reminder of what they'd fought for and the challenges that lay ahead. But for the first time in what felt like forever, he felt a shred of optimism, dangerous, sure, but also a necessary fuel for the battles yet to come. Ready to face whatever's next? Juno asked, her eyes bright with mischief and determination. Always, Arlen replied, feeling that familiar fire ignite in his chest. Bring it on, universe. We're just getting started. With that, they stepped out into the future they'd fought so hard to secure, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they'd shown the universe what humanity was made of, flaws, chaos, and all, and they weren't about to stop now. If anything, they were just getting warmed up. And as they walked away from the command center, Arlen couldn't help but chuckle at the thought of the tribunal trying to make sense of humanity's madness. Let them watch and learn. They might just find out that chaos wasn't such a bad thing after all.